Thank you so much for the introduction, David. I'm really excited to be a part of this. And I wanted to introduce myself. Really, the best way that I can do it is to say that I'm way too passionate about too many issues, and so I decided not to decide, and instead learned how to do digital marketing for other really cool brands. So B Centrico is managed marketing services for businesses with a purpose and brands with a purpose. We are part of Centrico Digital, which is a larger agency here. Everyone is here based in Ecuador. And we work with a lot of different industries, mainly in marketing automation, PPC advertising, and doing beautiful graphic design. So those are the main areas that we work in. And marketing automation has become a really big part of our business, of the services that we handle for companies, and we're mainly focused on tech spaces, e-commerce, and B2B companies. So I see that some people have already put in that they're using marketing automation, but some people are using various platforms, probably connecting them through something like Zapier or something else. And other people are not using marketing automation at all. So I'm actually going to go back and bring it way back to the basics and just explain the very basic sort of concepts around marketing automation, what you can do with it. And then I'll touch on some of those things, sort of checklists of things that you need to actually implement it. So in essence, we know that the second law of thermodynamics is that chaos is always increasing in the universe, and that progression toward disorder can never be reversed. And if that feels really familiar in your business, you're not alone. So web visitors and potential clients are generating millions of data points every day, but the systems that we use or that were used 10, 20 years ago really don't do a good job of capturing that information. And in essence, marketing automation allows you to understand all of those data points and organize them and use them to your advantage when you're marketing and selling a product or a service. We send these data points through systems. Sometimes they're aggregated systems of many different platforms. Sometimes they're just one platform. But the idea is to get the most relevant information about your potential customers and about your current customers, based on their context and interests. And the way that we do this is to either, again, aggregate a bunch of smaller systems into one and automate them, or use one single platform that can do it all. So an example here is if you've ever signed up for a webinar through a platform like GoToWebinar or Zoom webinars, you've probably gotten a confirmation of your sign up. Then you've probably gotten a couple of reminders of when that webinar is going to start. All of those messages are automated. That's an example, very basic example of marketing automation. Another example might be that after the webinar is done, they invite you to another webinar. That also could be automated because you joined in one webinar, then that indicates that you're interested in the webinars that company has to offer. So they probably automated messages to you to invite you to future events that you might be interested in. But it's not just sort of relegated to email. A lot of the time when we think of marketing automation, we think email is sort of the king and it's just about automating emails, but that's not really necessarily the case. A lot of marketing automation and sales automation is automating the processes on the internal side of your team, sending notifications and making sure that your sales and marketing team are connected, and that the marketing people are sending over the leads to the sales team when the time is right. So these are, some of the examples are drip campaigns that you may have set up before for different groups of people. So in a marketing automation system and a CRM system, you'll have data on the individuals that are in your database. And that data might be explicit, so things that they've told you, their job titles, their company name, their first and last name, and other might be implicit data, or their behaviors that those systems can track. So email opens, email clicks, page views, And things can be triggered, actions in those platforms can be triggered based on both implicit and explicit data. So you might send a different email, different sales email to a CFO than you would to a CIO. Those people might have very different motivations behind why they would want to purchase your service or product. And you might want to send them different copy in the emails based on that. The implicit data, you might want to send someone a reminder about a webinar, for example. If you send an invitation to a webinar and the person opened it but didn't register for the webinar, then you can automatically say, okay, I want to send anyone who opened the email but did not yet register another email, just to remind them, because they're so close to registering for my event. Marketing automation is also really great for creating feedback loops to listening to clients and potential clients to provide a better service. So you may come into a position where you have a lot of people in your database, but you don't really have enough information about them, so you want to collect more information. And so you might consider doing a campaign of a survey for people to update all of their information. And you might want to set up automated reminders to people who haven't updated their information, automated reminders of what the incentive is to updating their information. And you can also, in a lot of marketing automation platforms and email platforms as well, you can test different theories on what you think is going to drive people to take an action. So, for example, if we're taking the example of the survey to update people's information, you might consider sending a plain text email and to 50% of your database, and a HTML designed email to 50% of your database, and then learn from those lessons through that testing. You get the results back, and then you can plan out the next campaign based on those results. So to do all of this, obviously you need to collect information on your database, on your potential clients. So you might need to know things like, where do they work, or what did they study, where they live currently, when they graduated from college or high school, what kind of job title do they have, how many people work at their company. All of those might be really important data points for making sure that you're targeting the right people. And what marketing automation often allows you to do is what we call progressive profiling. So instead of asking for all of that data up front, which the person, when they first sign up for something on your website, is very unlikely to fill out a form that has 80 different points of data, you can actually program the forms through marketing automation to say, okay, if this person comes back to my website and signs up for something else, then I want to know these extra 3 data points about them, because I actually already have their first and last name. I actually already have their phone number. All I really need is the email to match that data. And then I want to know maybe their company size, their job title, and the industry that they're in. And then on the third visit, you might consider asking even more personal information, so that you know, once they've gone to your website a couple of times, signed up for different webinars or downloads or services or products, then you might want to ask them what one of their major challenges is, depending on what product or service you're selling. Or would you like someone from sales to contact you? And so you don't actually have to ask all of that information up front. But you can use progressive profiling to ask it in different steps so that it doesn't feel quite as intrusive at the very beginning, and you can collect more data. So then there's also lead nurturing, which you've probably heard of, but how do you actually do it? We know sort of theoretically what it means. You have your first touch point, maybe you get someone's contact information, then you start to send them educational information around your industry. And if they show interest in that, then you want to send them something more related to the product or the service, or something, what a lot of times we call middle of the funnel, or sort of the consideration phase, when they've already expressed interest in that educational information and content. And now you can start to introduce them to more branded, more salesy content, and keep going and pushing those people toward taking an action. So we usually separate this out into stages, from the first touch point to recognizing the problem, to evaluating alternatives, and then finally making a purchase and following up with those people after the purchase to make sure that they're satisfied, and then potentially bringing them back in to the sales cycle to do an upsell or to upgrade their service. But we know that the purchasing decision process is not always linear. So it's not necessarily that someone comes in, then they realize they have a problem, and then they consider solutions, and then they buy. That's not necessarily how it always happens. Some people may not even know that they have a problem, but they have heard of your brand before, and that's why they've signed up for an event. So other people might be ready to buy, ready to purchase, but they don't know who you are, and so they're not choosing you just because they've never heard of you, but they know exactly what solution they need. And so we can set up triggers in marketing automation platforms to get this data, to understand where people are in that decision process when they come into our system. I'll give you a really sort of clear-cut example. We worked with a touring company called Metropolitan Touring, and they had, when someone would sign up for more information about a specific tour, we had a very simple drop-down menu of how ready are you to travel? So one option was, I'm just browsing. Another one was, I want more information about this tour. And another one was, I'm ready to book. And we were able to send those people that said, I'm ready to book, automatically to the sales representatives, and they would have to call them within the next 24 hours. Other people who said they just wanted more information would receive more detailed information about the tour through email, and then would be sent to the sales team if they interacted with that content. Other people who said they were just browsing, we would sign them up for maybe the newsletter. We would send them through a drip campaign of information about lots of different tours and lots of interesting things that they could do. So that's an example, because a lot of people would come on the first time and just say, I'm ready to book. And we didn't want to lose those opportunities. Others weren't quite ready for that, and a sales call would have been sort of intrusive. Then there's this concept of lead scoring, and this is a sort of lesser known, or sometimes it's well known, but lesser implemented strategy, where you actually score people based on the behaviors and data, implicit and explicit data that they give you. It has a couple of different names in different platforms. So in Pardot, Salesforce Pardot, for example, they use scoring and grading. So they use two different systems. Grading meaning that they're grading how good of a fit the person is for the product or service, and scoring being how interested are they in the service. With HubSpot, for example, you just have one score, and you can aggregate both of that information of how good of a fit they are and how interested they are. Oops. And so these are a couple of examples where you might give 3 points to someone who consumes early stage content, 5 points to someone who attends a webinar, and maybe 10 points to someone who visits the pricing page. And then you can set up automations to your sales and marketing team to let them know when someone's gotten to a certain score, and set that benchmark of when someone gets to 20 points, we're going to send them on to sales automatically.
You maybe just quickly, I noticed you have a minus on some of that too. Maybe explain why you might have a minus on certain pages like careers.
Totally. Yeah. So that's another really good example. So a very good practice for lead scoring is when someone visits the career page, you minus points from them because they're clearly looking for a job with your company, which might be really great, but doesn't really help your sales team. Yeah. So you can add or subtract points based on that. So what do you actually need to implement marketing automation? Talked about a lot of different concepts of what you can do with it, but what is it that you need? So of course you need to pick a platform. There are a couple of websites that you can go to see reviews of the different platforms. There are some platforms that are specific to the industry. So if you're an NGO, for example, you might consider CVCRM, which is a marketing automation platform and CRM system specifically for NGOs and for fundraising. there are specific platforms for B2B marketing. So Salesforce Pardot, for example. HubSpot often sort of brands themselves as a B2B marketing platform, although they've sort of spread themselves thin throughout industries. And then there are other platforms that have very limited functionality, like MailChimp, and then there are systems that have really, really robust functionality but are much more complex and sort of require more technical expertise to manage, like something like Salesforce Marketing Cloud. So then obviously defining your buyer persona, this is important for any business and any marketing initiative. And so if you're working in marketing, you've probably already done that for your company. Mapping out the sales process and the stages in the pipeline. That's sort of a word that's borrowed from HubSpot, that they have sort of pipelines for the different deals in HubSpot. But you can set that up in other platforms as well. So understanding what is it that a salesperson wants to receive. So what stage should that person, the individual, be in when they get sent to sales? And then what is the process that salesperson can take them through, and where are the different opportunities for automation based on whatever platform you're using. Connecting ad accounts and social media. So on a lot of marketing automation platforms like HubSpot and Pardot and Salesforce Marketing Cloud, you can connect all of your marketing sort of channels into one place. And that helps you not only track each individual, where they came from, what ad they clicked on, what Google search term brought them to your website and brought them to convert on your website, but it also helps you map out and understand over time where those people came from, what campaigns contributed to the most leads, what campaigns contributed to the most deals being closed in the end. So it really sort of gives you a full circle reporting feature or functionality so that you can understand that better. Design templates and create the necessary emails and landing pages, CTAs, and forms that you need. A lot of the time people will be using different systems, so they'll bring in the forms that they're using on one platform and integrate them in with HubSpot or Salesforce. They might be using another system for landing pages, and that's completely valid. There are a lot of integrations into into these marketing automation platforms, so you don't necessarily have to scratch everything and start new, but you can integrate from other sources. And then, of course, set up the automations that you need to set up. So if someone comes in from a webinar that you've hosted, then you'll want to think about, while you're planning that webinar, you'll want to think about what is the kind of information that someone should get after this, and how should they be directed into that marketing and sales process. And then training your marketing and sales people can be kind of a hard adoption of new systems, as new systems always are sort of hard to adopt on a team. I would say that probably the easiest adoption are the types of platforms that are very user-friendly and so don't require a lot of technical expertise. Things like MailChimp, things like HubSpot are really, really user-friendly. They have a really nice user interface. But that also means that they don't quite have as many features or are quite as powerful as something like Salesforce. And so what you sort of sacrifice in power and sort of the features that you might want, you make up for in easy adoption. And if you're just starting out with marketing automation, it is worth it to pick something that's relatively simple to use. You can always sort of transition into a more complex approach, but especially if you're sort of a one-person operation, you don't need to become an expert in Salesforce to do marketing automation. There is marketing automation that you can do with MailChimp. There are things that you can do using the HubSpot free CRM and integrating that with different tools. So you don't have to necessarily get the most powerful platform to just start doing marketing automation. And then if you're already using marketing automation, so a couple of people said that they're already using it, I'll give you an example of a HubSpot audit that we often do. This is very simple as well to a Pardot audit, although some of the terminology changes and some of those things, some of those aspects change slightly. But if you're wondering, I'm already paying HubSpot, maybe $1,000 a month to have this really fantastic platform. Am I even getting the most out of it? These are the types of things that we look at. So we look at the account setup to see whether or not the website is integrated, the domains are authenticated. We make sure that the ad accounts are connected and the social media accounts are connected, so you're getting the full value of reporting. We make sure that you have the right properties and pipeline stages, make sure that all the integrations are working correctly, and that the sales team is really getting the most out of the sales automation part, so that they're not writing the same email over and over and over again, but they're using templates that can be used and just automate those or automate as quickly as possible the communication with their leads. Also look at things like the blog and the SEO. The SEO features on things like HubSpot and Pardot are not super robust. They're not really that powerful. I think that they're getting more features included all the time. For example, HubSpot just launched a new content management system. They're a new CMS. But the SEO features are not quite as robust. There's not quite as many reporting features on there. So I would, if you're interested in doing SEO, I would also recommend that you add on another tool, something like Moz or SEO Checkup, some other paid tool that can actually help you more clearly follow those recommendations. And then elements like forms, emails, landing pages, are they set up correctly? Do they work on all of the different email providers? Do they look good on mobile? All of those aspects we look at. And if you want an example of a HubSpot setup plan or a HubSpot audit or a Pardot audit or Pardot setup plan, I'm happy to send along any resources that might be helpful. So then, probably the most important and toughest question to answer at the very beginning is what platform am I even going to use? And some of those questions that you'll want to answer, again, I already said there's some industry specific platforms, but you also want to know how many users do you need and what kinds of features you need. So are you already managing all of your social media on something like Hootsuite or Sprout Social? Then you may not really need that to be part of your marketing automation software. So that might not be an important feature, but you really want to integrate all of your email marketing in there. So you'll want to have really nice builds for emails. I put this link here, technologyadvice.com. This is a really good website so that you can search for and filter for different products based on what you need. So check that out. I'll also type it in the chat here at the end. Very quickly, these are three platforms. There are many, many different platforms other than this, but these are the three that we've worked with probably the most. In Pardot, for example, you don't have really a very good blog or website platform. It's not quite as user-friendly. It's very sales-focused, but it's extremely powerful because it's connected to Salesforce. You do need Salesforce to operate Pardot, so it can't just be in a silo. You have to be using Salesforce already. But if you're already using Salesforce and you need to update your marketing, then I definitely would recommend looking into Pardot or Marketing Cloud. Marketo also doesn't have a blog or website platform. It's a little bit more user-friendly than Pardot, but not quite as user-friendly as HubSpot. It's very email-focused, but the reporting features on Marketo are not great. So if you really want a very powerful email platform. Marketo is a great option, but the reports aren't quite as nice as in Pardot or HubSpot. And then on HubSpot, you have, again, they've just launched a new CMS, so they have sort of the whole website and blog platform that's really easy to use. It's really, really user-friendly. I already said that this is great for user adoption. It's very lead generation focused. So where Pardot it has more features for sales because it's connected to Salesforce, which is a much more powerful platform. HubSpot is more about the marketing automation side. And this definitely has the easiest reporting features. I always use this sort of metaphor that HubSpot is like the Mac of marketing automation and Pardot is the PC. Marketo is somewhere in between. I say that because Pardot is really great and Salesforce is really great because it's so customizable. But it also means that you have infinite possibilities, which can be really hard to manage and really hard to know where to start. So unless you're willing to really invest in the personalization of Salesforce and Pardot, I wouldn't recommend it. I would more recommend something like HubSpot. It's much more user-friendly and there's a lot more out-of-the-box functionality. So to conclude, we know that the universe is always going toward chaos, and marketing automation attempts to bring that chaos to order. And that's the work that we do at B Centrico. So I know, great, we have lots of time for questions, so I'd love to open it up to any questions or concerns that you have about marketing automation.
I have a couple here, and then if anyone else wants to either raise your hand or put the question in chat, so we don't have a bunch of people unmuting at once. For those that don't know, in Zoom, you can click on participants and then hover over your name and say raise hand. One of the statistics I've heard of the importance of marketing automation, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, so I don't know if you know it, like how many times it takes for a person who's receiving like an automated drip campaign to respond and convert. I know it's more than a couple, but do you know that number off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that statistic particularly. I know in advertising, in digital ads, that it takes someone an average of 9 times seeing the same message for it to really register with them. So if we're talking about email marketing, you could potentially use that same number as sort of a reference point. But the beauty of marketing automation is that you don't actually need to know that number. That you may have someone that converts after 1 email, and that's awesome. And you can set up a system to that identifies those people that are most likely to convert. Probably the most impressive system that I've seen so far has been Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and then Einstein Analytics that does kind of all of the sort of AI behind that, of identifying people who are ready and putting people in incubation that aren't. But you can do the same thing in theory. You can do the same, very much of similar things in HubSpot, or even sometimes MailChimp using Zapier and the HubSpot free version to automate a system where if someone clicks on an email, then the next email you send them sends them a little bit further down the process. Someone who just opens the email, maybe they just get an email kind of in the same level of that process. And the really hard part, I think, about marketing automation is not setting up the actual automations. It's getting all of that content ready to push out, because you put together this fabulous campaign and you generate all these leads, but then you have no idea what to do with them. If you just send them all to sales, they're very unlikely to convert. Whereas actually you needed to set up 15 different pieces of content to set up the automations to then push people through to the right part in the process. So yeah, that's sort of the beauty of marketing automation, that you don't actually need to know that number, because it's also going to be different for everybody, right?
My recollection was it was somewhere around the same number of seeing the ads, of 5 to 7, somewhere in that range. If you want an example, I'll post the link as well. If you sign up for any of the Akimbo workshops, that's Seth Godin's group, they use drip marketing. They'll send you ones kind of every day, I think, for a while. Next question, you went into lead scoring, but why is lead scoring important? Why should people be doing that?
Yeah, so lead scoring is really good if you have a big volume of leads coming in and limited resources in sales. So if you only have a couple of leads coming in a week, it's probably not something that you need to set up, probably a waste of time at that point. But if you have a lot of leads coming in, for example, we work with a Google and Salesforce partner called Centrico. They're one of our clients, and they have a ton of leads coming in all the time inquiring about Salesforce and Google products, or just expressing interest in things through downloads and things like that. And so it's really good for a large volume of leads, probably more than 20 a week. Then lead scoring is a really good thing to use. And lead scoring, really what it does is that it gives you, it's not that you can go in and set it up right away. So you can't just go into HubSpot and put a couple of numbers in and and it's done. It really needs to be mapped out first. So you'll want to talk to your sales team and say, hey, what are you seeing that people consume on our website before they request a meeting with you? Or what are the most qualified leads? What do they typically already consumed on the website? You can also look at, if you're already using a marketing automation platform, go back and look through the history of people who actually converted and say, okay, 70% of the people that converted attended a webinar. So a webinar is a really good indication that someone is interested and is likely to convert. And so you have to set up and map out that process first. And I usually use a Google Sheet to map that out first. And then actually implementing it on the platform is a snap after that, because you just put in the value of the points related to either the fields in your database. So let's say if someone says, I'm a CTO, that gets them 20 more points because CTOs are my target. And then you can also set up automations like workflows to give people more points when they download an ebook or they attend a webinar or they respond to an email. So yeah, it's really important for companies that have a large volume of leads and not a lot of sales people or sort of sales, a big sales team.
And you mentioned the person filling out the form is the CTO, kind of a follow-on, and then you mentioned workflows. I assume you might have, if somebody does say they're a CTO, you might have a separate workflow or email sequence or content sequence that's targeted for CTOs that would trigger at that point.
Yeah, and there are functions on some marketing automation platforms that will let you do smart content. So if you're sending out a newsletter, you could put a smart content in there and say, okay, anyone who's a CTO is going to see this, anyone who's a CEO is going to see this, and anyone who's a CFO is going to see this. And you just send out one email. You have to create the smart content, right? To write out and choose what blogs they're going to see, or videos they're going to be directed to. But you can set that up and then just send one email, and the smart content will show for them. The same goes, and it's not just in email, it's in on landing pages too. If you direct someone to a landing page and they already have your marketing automation platform cookied in their browser, then they'll see whatever content is related to whatever sort of specifications that you put in the platform. So a CFO might see a case study where the company saved millions of dollars, and the CTO might see a case study where the technical team, 90% of the technical team reported better satisfaction while using the product, because different people are going to have different motivations and reasons for buying things.
Is that smart? Is that in HubSpot? I haven't come across that one yet.
Yeah, HubSpot you can use smart content in HubSpot, depending on what plan you have.
Super cool. A question came in from the chat. Have you seen people in small organizations balance successfully between sales activities and introducing marketing automation activities, particularly in nurturing?
Yeah, so you said that in marketing automation, it takes a lot more time than anticipated. And then you don't necessarily have the scale or the number of leads to kind of, I guess, justify the investment. So I actually work with a lot of small companies. My team, when we're doing smaller projects, a lot of the time is for smaller companies. And it's there's sort of a scale of what we recommend implementing based on sort of the size of the company. So with small companies, if we're starting with the smallest companies, the first thing that we would implement is sales automation. So if we're using HubSpot as an example, although you can set up this kind of sales automation in a lot of different platforms like Salesforce as well. But just getting together what the pipeline should look like, what are the different stages of that pipeline, and how we can automate those processes. For example, setting up automatic reminders to leads that sales has already contacted. That can save a small sales team a ton of time, and so that they don't have to go back and remember, what did I say to that person, and when were we going to meet, and did they already schedule a meeting with me? All of that all of that kind of grief can be saved by using sales automation. Once you kind of get past sales automation, once you have that implemented and that's working, then the next sort of stage is to do marketing automation, stuff like drip programs. And it really is a process, and it's really something that you have to invest time in doing, and not just time as in 40 hours a week, not necessarily, but it might be 4 hours a week over 3 months. And that's how you understand how people are reacting to different content. So I can give you an example of a roofing company that we're working with in Minneapolis right now, that is just starting to implement HubSpot. And HubSpot actually, I don't know if it's still available, but they were discounting 50% the professional plan during COVID. So something to look into if you're interested in it. And he took advantage of that and we started automating 2 workflows. And we just set up 2 workflows with, I think, 8 different pieces of content in each one for new leads and one for existing customers. And then through those workflows, we're going to find out how many people opened and clicked on certain content, what is then the content that we should continue to produce. And it's not necessarily with the objective of closing 100 new deals in the first couple of months. The objective with that is to understand what is the content that people are interested in, and what should we invest in creating for creating content on our website. And that can be really hard for small companies, because a lot of times you need, big wins right away. And marketing automation, honestly, is not the way to get a really quick win. It's a way to get a long-term growth.
Is it fair to say that, just following on that, the content creation, I think you alluded to this, or even outright said it, like that's where a lot of the work is, like the marketing automation workflow, if you know your way around it, it's relatively easy to set up, but having the content to fill 8 newsletters worth of, or 8 drips emails is where the
and you'll come across providers and one of the agencies that I'm kind of co-working with one of these clients is sort of just an HubSpot implementation agency. And so you send them, I want this text in this landing page, please create it, and they'll build it for you. The problem with that is that the actual build is not the hard part. It's coming up with the text on the page and coming up with the idea behind how people are going to, what people are going to receive at what time. That's the real hard part about marketing automation, is actually coming up with a strategy behind it. And so I have this client who's spending a lot of money on this agency to get unlimited tasks in HubSpot, but they're not a strategic partner at all. They only do the builds. And that's, to me, that's not really helpful because if you don't actually have the strategy behind it, you can build a million emails, but if you don't know who to send it to and when, then it's not sort of null and void. So I think the most challenging part about marketing automation is identifying what content you're going to create and who you're going to send it to and in what order.
And maybe just as a follow-on to that too, you mentioned using the content on the website. You have your newsletter, you have your marketing automation content. You know, how interchangeable is the content? Like, do people have to, if they're writing content for their website already, is it easy enough to repurpose it for a marketing campaign, or vice versa? If you write something for a marketing campaign, can you use it on your website?
Yeah, totally. When I start with a new client, what we typically do is we create one really beautiful, comprehensive pillar content. And that's something that's 5,000 words, and it has, you know, potentially videos in it, and it has images in it, and it has infographics, and it sort of has everything. And we repurpose that into email copy, into smaller blogs and pages, into potentially webinars, and repurpose all of that content and center it around that one idea. And that tends to work really well because you already have sort of a really strong basis for your content. And then you can pull out of that social posts, you can pull out of that, like I said, email copy, sales copy, and webinar ideas. And that's really the sort of, that's where the most investment comes in. And then actually implementing it and setting up the workflows is not actually the difficult part.
Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to come off mute. I have more that I'm sure I can fill the rest of the 50 minutes. But what I get, because I find the space fascinating. But feel free to unmute and ask Caroline a question directly if you'd like, or continue to put it in the chat. I'll give people another 15 seconds or so, and then I'll keep asking you more questions.
I love it. Keep it coming.
Going once. You mentioned like in the talk, like a first step of kind of what you do, and I think in answering Helen's question you did as well. But maybe what's one, if you wanted to dip your toes, let's pick HubSpot, and as a reference, Accelerator members for our program get a pretty decent discount. They offer it for startups in general. So if you go to hubspot.com/startup, you can see if you qualify for their startup program. But if you were like greenfield, what's one thing that you'd set up in HubSpot? Maybe walk us through an example of something you could do within that platform.
Yeah, so there is sort of the main implementation steps that you always do for any account, and that's to connect to the website, connect to the domains, and to connect all the forms, so that everywhere that you're generating leads, they're all coming into HubSpot. So if you're starting off brand new with HubSpot, those are things that you cannot not do. The next thing is to get the sales team on it. So what we've often done with smaller brands is just do the sales starter package. That's actually really affordable. It's $50 per month per user. And especially for small companies that might only have 3 sales representatives on their team, then you only need 3 of those licenses, and then everybody else can use anybody else. If the marketing team needs access to that information, they can access it for free, and they'll just have the free users. They just won't have the sales features. And so I think the first part is, and it's called a marketing automation platform, but it's really, the first step, I think, is the sales automation part of it. So you get those people set up, you get the pipeline stages correct, you identify those points where you need automation. So an example, we were working with Vintory, which is a sort of a business consulting firm for vacation home rentals businesses. And so they needed a system to actually, on the supply side, to get property owners to register their properties with their company so that they could then rent them out. And so what they have a had a really, really manual process where they would just get people coming in. They would get a notification of every form fill that came in, and then they would have to contact that person. They'd do a presentation, then they'd go to the next step where they'd go and visit the property. And they would sort of approve the property. They would come up with a contract and the terms, send that on. So they did all this really manually, and they did it all in an Excel sheet. So the first thing that we did was we connected the form that people were filling out to register their property with the company into HubSpot, so that all of those people were coming directly into HubSpot. And then we created automations based on what the person said about their property. So there were certain characteristics of the properties that they needed to fulfill before they would actually move forward. And they were actually wasting a lot of time on properties that really didn't meet their criteria. So we sort of adjusted the form to get that information right away, and just send an automated email to people who didn't qualify to say, hey, sorry about that, your property doesn't qualify, here are some alternatives that you can use. And so probably cut down on, maybe a third of the people who were writing in because they just didn't qualify. And then put the people that did qualify, then sent a notification on to the sales representative, who would then make that first point of contact through HubSpot by email. And so we set up, and I think they're called templates in HubSpot, if I'm not mistaken, set up a template that said, hey, thank you so much, your property sounds great, let's have a call, please schedule a meeting with me. And then set up automated emails after that. If they didn't schedule a call, then they would get a reminder 3 days later, a week later, and then after no response, it would create a task in Sales Starter that said, please, Joan, sales representative, call this lead. So after a week of no response, then they would call that lead, and then they would say, okay, if they didn't make contact, they just mark that in the contact, and it would go over to cold. So that's an example of sort of that first stage. And then you can kind of repeat that for each stage in the process. So if the call goes really well, the sales representative can mark, yep, this person goes on to the next stage. Now we're going to go visit the property. Please schedule your property visit. Again, kind of the same thing, reminders. But as you can see, the most important thing for us to understand at the beginning of that is, what do you need to go through to sign somebody? And so that's the first step, is to map that out, and then be able to implement sales automation through that. Then once you have that whole sales process figured out, that's when you can start to kind of dabble in the marketing aspect of it. So the sales process is to make sure that once people get to that very last stage of, yes, I'm interested in your product, I want to contact sales, that experience is really streamlined, and that experience is a really good experience for the user. So it's sort of like starting in the end and working your way back. Then you come back and you say, okay, people who are already interacting with my content, downloading, signing up for webinars, what is it that pushes them then to the next stage of contacting my sales team? And again, mapping that process out and seeing what's the content that we have right now and what can we push through automation. And then sort of after you have that figured out of, okay, I'm getting leads through these other channels, and then I've figured out what I'm going to do with them, then you can take another step back and say, how am I getting leads? How am I actually generating those leads? So that's when ads come in. That's when, potentially webinars, if you're not already using them, come in. That's when sort of content creation, extra content creation comes in.
Another question come in. When creating paid/sponsored ads in Twitter, can this be done in HubSpot or only directly in Twitter? Do you know that one?
I don't use Twitter ads, to be totally honest, a whole lot. We've not seen great results from them, really. They've been really good for promoting events. So that's typically what we've used them for. And I haven't set them up through HubSpot before. I'm not sure that you can do that. I know you can set up, you can link Facebook ads and you can link Google ads. I personally never manage ads through HubSpot. We'll connect them for sure, so that the leads coming in, it tells you what campaign they're from, what search term or what ad campaign they came from on Facebook. But I always manage and set up my ads in the platform, in the Facebook platform or Google or Twitter, because there's just not enough functionality in most marketing automation platforms to actually set them up and manage them. But Twitter ads, I'm not sure if you can connect that to HubSpot. I would imagine yes, but I'm not 100% sure.
We can look into it and post the answer later too. Another question came in. I've heard Facebook boosting is rather ineffective when you use automated marketing like HubSpot. Any thoughts on that? It sort of depends on what you mean by posting on Facebook. So if it's just posting on your Facebook page, or like
if you're
boosting a post on Facebook.
Boosting a post. That it's ineffective. No, boosting posts and creating ad campaigns in Facebook, they're pretty much one and the same. It's just, the format is different in Facebook, but it's not any different than another ad campaign that you would run in Facebook. So the same functionality that those leads would come in, they'd be marked as the source would be marked as Facebook ads.
Kim, if you want to maybe come off mute, I don't know if you can clarify that question a little bit more. Or not. There she is.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, it's Kim Dempsey here. I was actually watching a video a week ago about Facebook posting and then Facebook ads. And this fellow recommended to not use anything but going directly to Facebook, just the way they had it set up, that if you were to compare, posting through HubSpot versus posting directly in Facebook, the results would be dramatically different. Or even for boosting, putting some money behind a post.
Totally, yeah, I completely understand what you mean there. So I think that it's the difference between posting something on Facebook through HubSpot rather than posting it directly on Facebook or using a different platform. So just so it's really clear, you can post social media publications or posts through HubSpot. You can then go into the post and boost it. So just because you publish it through HubSpot doesn't mean that there's any money behind it. It's just sort of posted there, like you would if you were to post it. It just helps you kind of organize the content for your Facebook page, and you can schedule out posts using HubSpot. But then you can go into the HubSpot or the Facebook platform and boost those posts and put money behind it. And I'm guessing what his point was, or her point was that that if you just post on Facebook, you're not going to get nearly as much impact as if you would boost a post and put money behind it, which is totally true for Facebook. Facebook has one of the lowest organic reach of any of the social media platforms. If you're looking to get more out of organic social media, I do not recommend Facebook unless you already have a community on Facebook. It's really not a great platform to use. Even if you have a large following on Facebook, just the percentage of your followers that are even going to see your post is much lower than followers on Instagram, for example. So yes, organic posts on Facebook, whether or not you're scheduling them through HubSpot, are not nearly as impactful as a boosted or paid post on Facebook.
Thank you. But he was actually suggesting that if you posted through Facebook versus posting to Facebook through HubSpot, that there is a big difference.
Huh. I hadn't heard that, but doesn't mean that's not true.
I'll keep looking into it. I just thought it was very interesting.
I know back in the day, there used to be a difference between like whether or not your post got seen or not paid, but organically based on if you're using a third-party tool versus the the actual, Facebook provided tools, it would weight you differently in the algorithm. So that wouldn't surprise me if that was true. I think, we would post the ads on the platform itself largely because even like Hootsuite and some of those tools, they're great, but I find their feature set doesn't quite keep up with all the nuance that you can have in the ads. So unless you're dealing with a ton of advertising, I think doing it in the platform is always going to be the best choice anyway. I don't know if you would agree.
I've also seen discrepancies in reporting. So I have a client that uses Sprout Social, and I've seen discrepancies in reporting. So it looks like the posts posted through Sprout Social get lower engagement, but when you actually go on the Facebook platform and measure the engagements manually, they're more than what Sprout Social is reporting. Which is weird because you'd think that discrepancy would be the other way around. You would think that Sprout Social would use that discrepancy in their favor, but they don't. So it also might be a reporting issue. I hadn't heard about that on HubSpot, but it wouldn't surprise me that was also the case, that you might see lower engagement through HubSpot reporting, but that on Facebook it actually shows the real numbers.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, we are at the hour, so I want to thank Carolyn for joining us and spending the time with us here today. She's on the platform, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And do you want to put your contact information in the chat as well if anyone needs it, and we'll post that as well. Hopefully everyone enjoyed. We'll post the recording as soon as we have time to edit. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time today. It's great.
Yeah, well, thank you for all the great questions. And if anyone ever wants either an audit, like a format for auditing HubSpot or setting up HubSpot, sort of an implementation plan, I'm happy to provide that. We also have a format for a Pardot audit. So if you want to see any examples of that and to help your marketing team get the most out of those tools, just email me or message me on the Accelerator platform and I'll send you it.